Hey programmers, this video is one that a lot of people have asked me about. Say you're on the road and you need to copy your tour programming to that new rig that you're going to get at a festival. Well, to do that, we have to bring the festival rig into our touring show file and then start cloning. This is a pretty big cloning operation. Sometimes you're just using cloning for small stuff like copying sequence information from one fixture to another. Well, no problem, it's all the same concept. If you can follow what we do here, every other type of cloning is going to be a breeze. If you're new here, hi, I'm Kat West, and I feel like I'm constantly cloning programming from one rig to another. Today I want to take you through my process to do that. As with everything, this isn't the only way to do it, it's just my way to do it. The right way to do it is whatever works for you. First, let's talk about what this isn't. This is not a fixture swap. Sometimes a quick and dirty fixture swap is all you need, but I prefer cloning. And some people like to copy all of their fixtures and then swap them to the types that are in the festival show file, but for me, I feel like that's an extra step. Lastly, I'm not going to use the built-in clone menu. I'm going to use a macro, which I'll show you, to save time. But if you like the menu, it'll definitely get you there. Okay, cloning may not be an exact science, but your preparation work does have to be. We're going to go through my cloning checklist step by step to make sure that we get this right the first time. Step 1, prep your touring show file and the festival show file if the festival sent you one. I recommend backing up both show files with updated names before you prep. The more backups you make along the way in this process, the easier it'll be if you make a mistake in a step. In your touring show file, make sure that you're always using presets. I can't stress this enough. It's always important, but with cloning, it's key. Also, I like to make sure that I have a default preset. There's almost definitely going to be some parameters in the fixtures you're cloning to that don't exist on the fixtures that you're cloning from. That means that even if you use a mark preset at the top of all of your sequences, there may be some parameters that don't have any data in them, and you may need to update that information so that things don't look weird. I think that editing a default preset is faster than going through and editing fixtures, but your mileage may vary. There are a couple other things that you can do in your tour show file that you don't have to do, but these are things that I try to regularly do just because I know they're going to be huge time savers when I'm cloning. First, I never store the auto-created gobo presets into my queues. I have them and I use them to make selections, but before I store them into a queue, I make a new gobo preset that's specific for that song. Gobos obviously don't clone well because every fixture is going to use a different set of gobos, and it's a lot faster for me just to go through and update maybe 10 gobo song presets than it is for me to go through all of my gobo presets for all of my fixtures. The other thing I try to do in my programming is I try to never use the built-in strobe effects on LED strobe units. You know, those fixture-based macros. Rather, I build all of those looks with intensity effects. Those built-in strobe macros are quick, but they usually don't give me what I want, and they definitely do not clone well. See, the onboard strobe effects of one fixture is not going to be at all the same as the onboard strobe effects of another fixture. You could write presets for all of those effects and update all of those, but it's time consuming. Intensity channels are fairly universal, so they're going to clone pretty well. Next, we got to get that festival rig into our touring show file. Now, whether you're bringing in another MA2 show file or just manually inputting the patch, we got to make sure that we don't have any fixture overlaps or address conflicts. I take the universes of anything from my tour that I'm not bringing to the festival, and I move them up and out of the way. You can unpatch them, but I leave them in so that after my clone, if I see something weird on the festival rig, I can still compare my tour rig's output in the fixture window to remind me what it's supposed to look like. So Puft is here to remind me that some people might be worried about parameter calculation. If you are, these higher universes probably aren't going to bone you on site because by default, the MA is going to start calculating from the lowest universe number. But if you want to be specific about it, you can use request universes to specify which universes you want to output. Here's a request universe macro that tells the session to only output the first 10 universes. Okay, fixture and channel renumbering. Personally, I like to leave my tour fixtures alone and change the festival numbers to prevent overlap. I'll take the festival numbers and I'll just add 1,000 or a 10,000 number before them. So for example, Festival Fixture 101 might become Fixture 9101, Festival Fixture 201 might become 9201, and so on. This is an easy way to prevent overlap, but it also gives me a quick shorthand, so when I'm on site with the festival, I know that I can just subtract that 9 before the numbers if I need to ask the local crew for a fixture reset. After each show's prep, back up and make sure that you give your touring show file a new name because he's about to become a super show file with both rigs inside. Step 2, bring the festival patch into your touring show file. If the festival has only sent you plot paperwork, it's a bummer. You got to manually input all of the patch and set up the rig in 3D. If the festival sent you an MA2 show file, then great. You could use PSR or import-export to bring their rig into your show file. If you don't know how to do these, I've got videos on both processes. I personally prefer PSR because it means I can also bring in any groups or layouts that they have as well. Regardless of which way you get the data in there, we don't want both of our rigs occupying the same 3D space. So you're going to want to take your festival rig and slide it over and maybe make a couple of new camera views. If you didn't PSR in any of their groups or layouts, now's a good time to make those too. Once you're done, back up that super show file again and get ready to do some paperwork. Step 3, figure out what you're cloning from and what you're cloning to. It's truly unlikely that you're going to have a one-to-one fixture lineup between your two rigs, so you're going to have to make some decisions about what fixtures to clone from and what fixtures to clone to best recreate your tour. And you, as lighting director, are going to be the best person to decide that because you see it every day. This is the first step in the design portion of our process. It's partly about mechanics, what's the functionality of the lights. It's partly about their placement in the rig, and it's partly about feel. What's the purpose of the lights and which units in the festival are going to be able to match that up the best? I like to sit down and make all those decisions before I start cloning. Sometimes it's just me with a pen and paper at the back of the bus. Sometimes I'm scratching out on their plot about which fixtures I think are going to be the best. Either way, at the end of the process, I end up with a list of what fixtures I want to clone from and what fixtures I want to clone to. And pay special attention to multi-instance fixtures. There may be times when you're cloning from a unit that has more cells to something that has less cells, or vice versa. In this example, my touring show file has JDC1s in the full extended mode where I have individual control over every single cell, but the festival plot has JDC1s in the super compressed mode. There's parts of the fixture that will clone correctly, but when it comes to things like my color cells, I only get one in compressed mode, so I'm going to have to make some decisions. Let's take a look at these JDC1s so that I can explain a little better. The compressed JDC1 just has one fixture, but my extended mode has 26. The first subfixture has stuff like tilt, reset functions, and some built-in strobe macros for the white cells. The second fixture has more built-in strobe macros for the RGB cells and overall color. The next 12 are all my individual RGB cells, and the last 12 are all my individual white cells. These last two sections are where I do the bulk of my programming, but we also definitely need the tilt programming. So we got to do what I call the double clone, and right now that just means selecting the fixtures that I want to use to do this. I'm going to use the first subfixture of my JDC1s to clone to the compressed festival JDC1s so that I can get all of my tilt information and my control channel presets. Then I'm going to pick one of each of my JDC color cells, probably from somewhere in the middle, to clone a second time to the JDCs so that I can get all of my color effects. This compressed version will never create the same looks as the expanded version. I'll never get my animations, but we try to get it as close as we can based on what we got. I'll show you this double clone when we get to step 5, but for now, it's step 4. Clone fixture types to update global presets. Okay, we're finally ready to start cloning. Now there is a clone menu that you can use, but like I said, today we're going to use a macro, so let's talk about it. If you're going to use this, make sure you understand how it works and take care not to run it accidentally. It can easily destroy a show if used improperly, so please don't go to the dark side on this, all right? Okay, here's our macro. You'll notice that a lot of these lines have some similar information, and that's these two groups, number 2461 and 2462. See, I like to figure out what I'm cloning from and store it into group 2461, and I store whatever I'm cloning to in group 2462. These two group numbers are fairly arbitrary. They can be whatever you want, but keep them out of the way. If there are fixtures in these groups and someone hits that macro even accidentally, programming will be changed. It also means that if you're cloning a lot of lights, then when you're making a new selection to store in these groups, make sure that you overwrite what's in the groups. Otherwise, you could accidentally reclone and clone to the wrong fixtures, and it would basically be a disaster. Also, when I'm done cloning, I make sure to empty out these groups. I never delete them, and I go the extra step of locking them as well. If I'm handing my show off to an operator, I don't want them to accidentally destroy a bunch of my work. Some people prefer to reference names of groups in their macros rather than numbers, and some people like to have pop-ups where they input the fixture numbers. That's all personal preference. Back in the macro, these first few lines are to clone all of my presets. Always clone your presets first, then your effects, and then finally your sequences. Presets are stored in pools with every pool having a number. For example, the all pool is 0, so my first line says that I'll be cloning from my all pool starting at number 1. I've said through with no second number, so that tells the console to do all of the presets in the pool. I've then put in 2 options that answer the questions in the pop-up menu so I don't have to keep hitting the screen for each of these lines. Merge, so that we only add data, and NC, which means no confirm, which actually finishes the syntax, again eliminating me from having to click on the screen. If you want to have the prompt option, just change these. All of the rest of these preset lines are for all the other preset pools like color and position, and then this line works the same way, but it clones all of my effects. Lastly, this line clones all of my sequence programming. You'll notice that I'm not cloning groups or worlds. For me, in what we're doing, it doesn't make sense because I want to keep those things separate. So we've got the macro, and the first thing we're going to use it for is to clone global presets. Do you have global presets in your show file that you want to stay global? Well, then to do that, we have to clone fixture type to fixture type before we clone individual fixtures. See, an individual fixture clone will result in selective presets. The only way to keep a preset global is to clone from fixture type to fixture type. If you don't have any global presets in your show file, then I guess you could skip this step, but I bet that you do. So let's take a look at one. I've got a BMFL spot fixture type 3 in my touring show file that I'm going to clone to the Festival Vipers, fixture type 136. So I'll store fixture type 3 in my clone from group and fixture type 136 in my clone to group. Before I hit that macro, I always clear out and double check that the right fixtures are inside each of the groups. I want to get this right the first time. I'll run the macro. See how it needs to send my items to the network? Well, if you can, drop out of the session while you're cloning. It'll just save you a little bit of time. Let's select the new Vipers and take a look at some colors. Yep, these work. All right, next I'm going to repeat the process for the rest of my fixture types, remembering that each time that I store those groups, I need to overwrite, and again, I always double check before I run that macro. Once we have all of that done, guess what I'm going to do? Yep, I'm making a backup. Step 5, clone fixture to fixture. This is the bulk of our clone, so we're going to need that list of fixtures we're cloning from and to from step 3. Whether that list is something that you have written down or maybe you've already built groups into your show file, now is the time that we have to get the right units into the right cloning groups. I like to do these in chunks. If you've got a couple of small rigs, you could absolutely put all of your from fixtures into the from group and all of your to into the to group, but you need to make sure, absolutely sure, that both fixture selections are in the right order. Because selection order is everything, and because of how multi-instance cloning can work, I can't do that. Maybe I have a strip light with 20 cells that I need to clone to another strip light that has 40 cells. Well, that's not going to be a one-to-one clone, so doing the whole rig in one go is not going to work. It's also not going to work for those compressed JDC ones that I have to do the double clone to. One thing you got to consider before you clone fixture to fixture is those global presets that you already cloned with fixture types. Since cloning fixture to fixture makes cloned information selective, you could end up with presets that are a combination of global and selective. The presets will still work, but because it defeats the purpose of the work we did cloning those presets globally, it basically sucks. We can get around this by editing our clone macros so we don't include these global presets in our fixture-to-fixture clone, but yeah, it's a workaround that can add extra time to the whole process. I want to clone my Tour BMFL spots to the Festival Vipers. So first, I'm going to select the Upstage BMFLs. I'm going to store them to my From group. Remember to choose Overwrite. I'm going to clear out, grab the Upstage Vipers, store them to my Clone 2 group, again, Overwrite. Then I'm going to clear out and I want to double check each one. Then and only then will I hit the macro. Then I'll repeat the process for the rest of the units in my rig, giving special attention to multi-instance units like those JDC ones. Let's take a look at cloning my Tour's top row of JDC ones to the Festival's downstage row of JDC ones. Again, I like to do these in smaller chunks. Remember, I need to clone the first instance of my Tour JDCs to the compressed JDCs, and then I need to clone one of my colored cells to the compressed JDCs. So I'm storing the first instance selections in my From group, selecting Overwrite, and then storing the compressed JDCs in my To group, Overwrite. Again, I double check each. Then I hit the macro. Next, I want to select the color cells from my top row of Tour JDCs and overwrite them to the From group. I'm keeping the same destination fixtures in my To group because this is the second part of the clone. So quick double check. And we clone. That's it. Next, I just repeat the process for the other rows. There might be some fixtures in the festival plot that don't need a full clone. For example, perhaps there's some perimeter lighting in the festival rig that I don't necessarily want to sync up with my cues, and I don't know what I want to do with it just yet. So I might use a copy of my cloning macro that copies everything except for sequences. That way, when I get on site, I have a lot of preset options to choose from. When I'm done with all of my cloning, I make sure to empty out those cloning groups. I also lock them, and of course, I make a backup. Step 6, update our programming. Now we gotta go through and update all those presets and effects. For presets, we gotta look at focuses, colors, those song gobos. Most everything that's in a preset is probably gonna need to be touched. Cloning will get us close, but I want this to look really good. After the presets, we gotta check out all of our effects. You might notice that some are running a little weird, and that's because when we clone, the console tries to do the math to line up the effects, and that results in what they call individuals. Sometimes the math works, and sometimes it really just doesn't. If you have a strange looking effect, edit it, and you'll see that some of these cells are in pink because of those individuals. At the bottom, click Remove Individuals. That'll clear those out, and then try your effect again. The other thing you'll need to update are any bitmap effects that you have in your show file. Bitmaps reference layouts of fixtures, and because now you have new fixtures with new layouts, you can either re-record your bitmap layouts or update your bitmap presets to point to your new festival layouts. All done updating presets, effects, and bitmaps? Cool, back it up. Step 7, test your cues. Always try out your cues. Again, you're gonna know best what the looks and feels of the songs are. Maybe something cloned and it's technically perfect, but it just doesn't feel right. Well, if you have time, change it. I also find it helpful at this point to use worlds that will break up the rigs between my tour and the festival. Sometimes being in a festival-only world just helps me focus on my editing, especially when I'm working with large amounts of data in the tracking or fixture sheet. Let's play a few cues. Obviously, there's some focuses that need to be refined, but that's easy. Now here's a problem. In my layout, I'm not seeing any of my compressed JDC ones doing anything. In a tracking sheet, I can see that they're running the programming. It's just that there's another update we need to do. The compressed JDCs have a second dimmer that our expanded JDC ones didn't have because we had all that individual control. Because we didn't have it, nothing got cloned to that second dimmer channel, and there's no value for it in any of my cues. This is where that default preset is going to come in handy. I'm going to put that second dimmer channel at full and update that preset. And hey, now I can see them. This is just one example of something that can happen when you're cloning LED strobes. There might be other channels you need to play with, like maybe duration. When you're happy with your cues, do one more backup and then proceed to step 8, which is have a great show. So we got our show all cloned. Feel free to build and use that same macro if you like, but remember to take care that you don't accidentally run it except in times when you mean to. Any cloning, if done improperly, could seriously destroy a show. But if you're making backups constantly, then you've got a safety net. That was a long one, but it was a good one. If you like this and you want some more, please subscribe. Thanks for watching and happy programming.